Okay, well, good evening and welcome to the City of Pinole Planning Commission, regular meeting for Monday, June 26, 2023. There are many ways to watch the meeting. One is in person with us at the Pinole City Council Chambers at 2131 Pear Street, live on channel 26. You can check the schedule out at www.ci.pinole.ca.us. Video stream live on the city's website, also at www.ci.pinole.ca.us, or the Zoom video conference with the webinar ID 865-0537-5301. Members of the public may submit a live remote public comment via the Zoom video web conferencing by phone 1-669-900-6833 or 1-253-215-8782 or 1-346-248-7799. We will start with a pledge of allegiance. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon their home. We are proud to continue for their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for their stewardship and support and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Planning Commissioner Hannum, could you please do a roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Lambulian.
Here.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Present.
Commissioner Bender. Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Benuelos is absent. Vice Chair Menes.
Here.
Chair Benzuli.
Here.
Let the record show that we have a majority, we have a quorum tonight and can take action on any item. Great.
I should also mention, if you do want to submit written comments to the planning staff, you may do so via email to dhannum@ci.pinole.ca.dus. On the meeting order. We are now at item C, citizens to be heard. The public may address the planning commission on items that are within its jurisdiction and not otherwise listed on the agenda. Planning commissioners may discuss the matter brought to their attention, but by state law, action must be deferred to a future meeting. Time allowed is 5 minutes each. Mr. Shu, do we have any citizens to be heard?
I don't see anyone right now.
Great. We will move on to item D, meeting minutes, the planning commission meeting minutes from May 22nd, 2023. Does anyone have any media questions or comments on the meeting minutes?
Yes, I have one comment related to on page 8. And it was lines 39-40. And it's a recording of a comment that I made. And what I'd like to say is what I actually said, as far as I remember, is he hoped this project would not exacerbate, you should say, the existing freeway-like conditions on San Pablo Avenue. I wasn't talking about the freeway. Well, 80. Okay. And that's my only comment.
Anybody else, any comments? Otherwise, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the amendment that Commissioner Bender has indicated?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the amendment suggested by Commissioner Bender.
I'll second.
We could have a vote.
Commissioner Lambulian.
Yes.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
Commissioner Bender.
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez. Abstain. Vice Chair Menes.
Yes.
Chair Benzuli.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-1 with 1 abstention.
There is no old business. Item number G, new business, objective development design standards, which is the introduction to the start of work on preparing objective development design standards, the proposed timeline, and the role of the Planning Commission ad hoc committee. Planning Commissioner Hannum, you have a presentation, I assume?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, I just wanted, before I get started, I just wanted to say that we handed out a more visual timeline. We had a timeline that we included as part of the attachment of the staff report, but we also wanted to include just an easier timeline to follow, kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at for time on this project. So basically, what as part of our housing element, pursuant to Program 13, the city adopted housing element. The city is developing objective design standards, or what we call ODDS. The review of multifamily and mixed-use development applications. In addition to SB 9, Housing Element Program 13 was developed in response to state housing laws, SB 330, the Housing Accountability Act, as well as SB 35. These laws significantly restrict localities from applying the non-objective, quote, subjective development standards to the review of a housing project of 2 or more units. Only adopted only adopted objective standards that do not require interpretation are allowed to be used to deny eligible housing projects. Implementation of Program 13 will ensure the city has a robust set of adopted objective development standards that will provide multifamily developers with more predictability and a clear, streamlined review and approval process. And in turn, the city will set clear expectations for the design of the multifamily developments in Pinole. Basically, is what staff is requesting tonight. Staff is requesting that the Planning Commission designate the housing ad hoc committee that was selected in our reorganization to start the process of working with these development standards, subjective and objective standards, for basically the 3 corridor specific plan, which was last updated in 2020, the zoning code, which was 2020, and the Old Town guidelines was last updated in 1997. So, and that's when they were adopted. There were a lot of, as part of the historic review process, there were a lot of changes to the historic guidelines. However, those did not get adopted as part of the program. And so the document has remained the same as part of the process. In terms of the background, just to kind of give the commission some background on this project, the state of California has enacted overall several new laws to increase housing supply and affordability and reduce obstacles for housing production. The state mandates present an opportunity for cities and counties to revisit existing design guidelines, convert any subjective guidelines to design standards, and create objective residential design and development standards, and expedite the application and design review process. As defined in state law, objective standards are defined as standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and are verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark, knowable by both the development applicant and public official. New state law prohibits local jurisdictions from denying or decreasing densities of affordable or market rate multifamily housing projects unless the project fails to meet one of the more adopted objective standards established in the general plan, zoning code, specific plan, or design guidelines. So if the projects, when they are submitted to the city and they do not meet all of the standards, we can then say, no, the project does not meet the standards that have been outlined as part of the objective development standards, and we can deny those projects. So the three big laws that have kind of driven this is SB 35, and of course the Housing Accountability Act, and SB 330. Senate Bill, what we call SB 35, went into effect in January 1st, actually in 2018, which was a part of a comprehensive bill package aimed at addressing the state's housing shortage and high costs. SB 35 requires a streamlined ministerial approval process for multifamily residential developments in jurisdictions that have not yet made sufficient progress toward meeting their regional housing need allocation. Included in the streamlining process, these cities and counties are required to establish objective design standards for multifamily developments, and to qualify these projects, these SB 35 projects must meet affordability standard and satisfy certain other requirements. Now, in our case, the city has made an extensive stride within its regional housing need just in the last couple of years, and we're probably about 85% to our arena right now with the housing projects that were just approved as part of this projects. So we're in really good shape, and we're just starting our 8-year cycle. So it's going to be 85% in with 8 years to go. I think we can get really close of getting to our arena number. The Housing Accountability Act establishes the state's overarching policy that government may not deny, reduce the density of, or make infeasible, affordable, or market rate housing development projects, or emergency shelters, or farm worker housing that are consistent with objective development standards. And of course, this provides developers more certainty about the standards, conditions, and policies that apply to their projects. Local governments that deny projects due to subjective standards could be in violation of the HAA. So if we do that, then at that point, if it's an appeal, if it's a ministerial by staff, they can appeal to the Planning Commission, which then can appeal to the council. Only those subjective standards. If staff denies the project based on subjective standards. And of course, Senate Bill 330 or SB 330, which we call the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, which went into effect on January 1, 2020. This bill is a little different than the rest. This one actually has a sunset clause, basically stated for January 1st, 2025, as a means to address the housing crisis in the state. During this period, cities and counties and urban areas are prohibited from rezoning or imposing new development standards that would reduce capacity for housing or adopting new design standards that are not objective. The bill also defines previously undefined terms such as objective standard, complete application, and sets forth vesting rights for projects that use that kind of a pre-application process. Table 1 kind of just gives you an outline of the difference between what is a subjective and objective standard. In terms of the subjective standard, of course, requirements that are subject to interpretation. For example, height of the new building must be compatible with surrounding structures, or the top of the building story must be articulated to reduce massing. Whereas an objective standard would read measurable, quantifiable, easily defined, and enforceable requirements. Height is limited to 35 feet. Or the top of the building story shall be set back at the rate of 1 foot for every 5 feet of height of the floor follows. So it's a direct requirement. You can read it, you can find it in our documents, and that would be considered an objective standard. And that's kind of the whole thing that we're doing with all of these different documents, is trying to make those where we have more objective standards. Just in addition, with recent changes to state law, we saw they really set short time limits on application completenesses and whether application complies with jurisdiction's adopted standards. So if the jurisdiction fails to notify the applicant that the application is incomplete or that it is inconsistent with an adopted standard within the required period of application, is deemed complete or compliant. So if we don't, now they've put more penalties in there that if we don't outline things or we miss something, that we can't go back and give them. And so that's what it is on that particular date. Let's just say the end date of the application period is September 30th. If we didn't identify all the standards and everything that was outlined by September 30th, we're pretty much stuck with what we with what we did. And basically we can't go after them, and we can't identify new subjects or any defects in the application as part of that process. And then the jurisdiction must note all inconsistencies during the initial application review within an application. So if there are substandard things involved with the application, whether or not their height is higher than what it's required, we have to make sure we outlined all that within the completeness letter so that the changes can be made, so that when they do submit their quote application, then everything falls within our development design standards. State law prescribes certain eligible projects that are only allowed to be reviewed under ministerial review. So as opposed to discretionary review. Ministerial review, of course, means a process for development approval involving personal judgment by the public official. As to the wisdom of carrying out the project, the public official merely ensures that the proposed development meets all applicable objective standards for the proposed action, but uses no special discretion or judgment in reaching a decision. So a ministerial review must often basically what we would call a staff level review and approval. So a long-winded, we're just saying that's what a ministerial review is. It's a staff level review. And in terms of discretionary review, which then moves on like planning commission. So table 2 kind of outlines discretionary versus ministerial reviews and what is the difference. Project undergoes design review for discretionary, qualitative judgment review by city staff and planning commission, depending on what the project is. And then of course, planning commission determines the project's compliance with design guidelines. Whereas that's more of a discretionary, whereas a ministerial review, a streamlined review by city staff, removes personal or subjective judgments, and consistency with objective design standards is the primary tool for project review. So those are and we will be putting as part of what the subcommittee will be doing is putting in all of these requirements and how we regulate how we're able to, with applications and ministerial versus, discretionary, and work through the law. And so we set up those standards. So just kind of in terms of analysis, in 2022, the staff knew this was coming and this was going to be a part of the new norm. And so staff contracted with some professional consulting groups, WRT and Sustainable Community Planning, kind of just makes it to evaluate our documents and to make some recommendations for the update of the city's three major design documents, which is basically our zoning code, our three corridor specific plan, and our downtown design guidelines, Old Town design guidelines. And so after reviewing the three documents, the consultant team and staff cataloged all the existing standards as being either objective or subjective, and looking at potential areas to where there could be some ministerial review, some changes in how they're reviewed, whether ministerially or with discretionary. And kind of table 3 kind of outlines what with each of the three documents, what was kind of the regulatory document content and what we looked at in terms of in looking at where are our subjective standards and objective standards. In terms of Pinole Municipal Code, we looked at all the residential districts, so the R1s through 4, as well as our RMUs and CMUs and OIMUs, where residential uses are allowed within certain criteria. So we took a look at those, and basically kind of the drift we got from the consultants was that the PMC also contains overarching regulations that pertain to all the districts, including administrative provisions, which is in Article 1, our site planning standards in Article 3, as well as our special use standards in Article 4, and then of course resources conservation standards, as well as our titles 12 and 15. So we'll be taking a look at all of those and taking a look at where those objective and subjective standards are. As part of our three corridor specific plan, we add development and design criteria within our three corridors for San Pablo Avenue, Pinole Valley Road, and Appian Way. We're making sure that we present major opportunities for mixed use and multifamily developments. So we'll be taking a look at mostly chapter 6, which is our land use standards, chapter 7 and 8, which talk about our private realm standards and our public realm standards guidelines. So we'll be taking a look at those as well. And our Old Town guidelines, basically, which provide for advisory guidelines for development that is within the historic Old Town to retain its established historic character. So that document will probably have probably the most change, because that document was adopted in 1997. There's a lot more subjective requirements in terms of colors and massings and buildings, and this shall be this, and in terms of the neighborhood and those types of things that we talked about earlier. So that we think that one will probably be will take some time. So with that, with the basically, and with all of these reviews, the reviews reveal the following opportunities for adjustment and clarity. So it's kind of what we reviewed in the table, kind of what came out of the review in terms of the Pinole Municipal Code, but basically that we do have objective standards in terms of setbacks, height restrictions, floor area limits are present. But most design related criteria are expressed as guidelines or are achieved through a discretionary entitlement process to achieve design compatibility, which, like our findings, because those are like for mixed use, we have our comprehensive design review. Those are discretionary. We've got findings that commissions are to be made. Standards are needed to design characteristics that are critical to the modulate building mass and assure facade articulation, and also support walkability and achieving desired streetscapes, public realms, to ensure that our appropriate building scale for the neighborhood compatibility. Discretionary entitlements. The code provides detailed regulations for various entitlements in terms of plan check, administrative use, administrative design review, conditional use, sign permit, all of those, but they lack an objective review criteria other than compliance with specific objective regulations. So, for example, creation of objective standards for building design, specific land uses, landscaping, parking lot design, grading, and subdivision improvements will allow the city to achieve some more design standards in cases where discretionary permits are precluded. So we're again looking at just tightening things up so that these are objective and they're not subjective. Verification of adopted public works standards, so making sure that our sidewalks, so they say sidewalks are 5 feet and not 5 feet are within this area, and they'll be rented and be consistent with the sidewalk across the street. Those types of things. They have to, just general standards. Building and parking type. The specific plan or the code. The specific plan has mostly they have conditional residential uses, basically within the San Pablo Avenue and Pinole Valley Road accesses, which require a use permit for multifamily and emergency shelters in some districts. So we'll be looking at taking a look at making those either permitted uses or ministerial approval for those projects. Looking at building, we'll divide in terms of building height exceptions in all 3 corridors. We do allow for building height exceptions. We'll define what those missing height exceptions and such as roof access and stairwells and those types of things. So as well as in the specific plan, we'll be also taking a look at screening rooftop equipment. We'll be taking a look at trash enclosures, regulate locations of these features to be away from public sidewalks and adequately screened. So also looking at open space requirements, establishing minimums and open space requirements, flexibility that allow for shared space to meet most of or all of the requirements. Private open space requirements should be appropriate of the housing types anticipated. Provisions of support of a traditional housing must be permitted. So we'll be taking a look at what is allowed within those corridor areas and updating those. Street frontage is the same type of thing. The current objective standard guidelines will reflect stated objectives to make sure that we've got pedestrian oriented, street frontages. Standards are needed to designate land use appropriate for ground floors and minimum proportions of building facades along the build to setbacks to highlight building entries and define minimum amounts of ground floor transparency or window areas. So we'll be taking a look at all of those requirements as part of the plan. And part of the Old Town, again, the historic structures will address the protection of the historic structures and consult with the qualified cultural resources consultants. Make sure that, again, they're following specific guidelines of being able to either maintain or construct these new facilities. Compatibility, just to make sure that we're defining represented characteristics and require characteristics that maintain consistency and compatibility as new development occurs. So we just need to make sure that we're focusing on standards that will be as stated in the report, like cornices, and making sure that they all are meeting the same requirement, and there's not one requirement for one building and another requirement for another building. We'll look at to codify, base, middle, and top in terms of buildings forms. Again, so we don't run into what's compatible with or that. So we'll be taking a look at that. In terms of the timeline, we're looking at basically an overall work program to be completed by May of 2024. That's our goal, which is consistent with the timeline outlined in our program 13 of our adopted 2023-2031 housing element update. The ad hoc committee is slated to meet approximately 6 times throughout the process, with the objective development design standards going to the full planning commission sometime in April, and the city council sometime in May. And of course, attachment 1 in your schedule shows the outline, the dates of kind of what we're looking at for the project. And basically, staff is recommending that the planning commission take the following actions for the purpose of creating an objective standard for eligible multifamily projects and carry out the provisions of Housing Element Program 13 and provide feedback regarding the proposed timeline. Attachment 1, and assign the design review ad hoc committee to work with staff to prepare a set of recommended amendments to the Pinole Municipal Code, the 3 corridor specific plan, and the Old Town design guidelines. So that ends staff's report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannum. Go around the commission if there are any questions of the staff. Commissioner Bender?
I just have a couple of rather quick questions. From page 1 of the staff report. And it talks about development standards to the review of a housing project of 2 or more units. I'm kind of curious, where exactly does that 2 or more units come from? I'm a little, maybe from my little lack of knowledge in some aspects of the subject, it just seems like such a low threshold.
I'm going to refer that to the city attorney.
Yeah, state housing law defines housing development project as anything 2 or more units. It comes from state law, and it's essentially supposed to cover all housing projects except for one single family unit being built.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Also, just again, the Old Town Design Guidelines, the 97 version, the map that identified those areas, that will be the basis for those discussions. And
At this point, yes, because that's the adopted map.
and then on page 3, there was a sentence towards the second to the bottom paragraph. It said, if an application, and it stopped. That was the second paragraph from the bottom. Was there anything intended there?
No, that should have been removed. I mean, it should, all of it was was part of the other paragraph. That should have been removed. It's not removed.
Okay. And then again, I just want a bit of clarification because the about the ministerial review. At one point I went through and read the streamlined ministerial approval process guidelines published by the CDHCD.
Mhm.
And it did talk about, I'll read part of that paragraph. It says ministerial design review or public oversight of the application, if any is conducted, may be considered by the local government's planning commission or any equivalent board or commission, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to like implies there's some kind of wiggle room as opposed to sort of the draconian public perception that the ministerial review is just as you've described it, Dave, that it's staff only. Could I get some clarification on
Yeah,
that?
I'll let Alex.
Yeah, a ministerial review doesn't describe who the decision maker is. It describes what the review is. So ministerial review is really basically like a checkbox. You're going down, you're saying, doesn't meet the setback requirements, doesn't meet, and then if it does, check, 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 it's approved. So sometimes it's possible that could come to the planning commission for that approval. Other times it might be staff level decision and depending on what it says in the zoning code. It is possible also that, sometimes staff makes discretionary determinations. There are some staff level, permits that go to staff for this decisions, like administrative design review right now that have discretionary elements of them, but that discretion is exercised by Dave and not by planning commission. There are also cases separate from ministerial that are a mix of some, a little bit of both. So we talk about the Housing Accountability Act, where you have to approve projects that meet all of your all of the city's objective standards. There's still room in that case for a planning commission to exercise some discretion on conditions of approval and certain things like that. Within reason. At some point, a condition becomes so significant that you're really denying the project as proposed. But so it really just depends on what the application is and how our both state law and our zoning code determine who the decision maker.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And if I might add, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, this process will determine who, right? Because that's what we want.
The zoning code right now, the zoning code determines who is the decision maker for certain types. projects, and then there are occasionally state law, will supersede that sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Menace.
So Commissioner Bender already asked one of my questions about the what clause back on the third page. I'm still trying to hunt down where the city has the current housing element, because the copy of it I had over on my phone was an earlier one that had different numbering for programs. I'm trying to get the land use planning for Pinole.com website, and it's just drawing a blank page.
It should be up now. We just sent the revised version to the state. So you might want to check the website because we might have uploaded.
Right, I'm trying to get the website and it's being
Okay.
uncooperative, so I'll try
Okay.
working on that more later.
Okay.
But I had some inquiries even without accessing that, so on page, let's and bookmark this. Page number 5 for the Old Town Design Guidelines. It was discussing basically need to make a bunch of adjustments there. And one of the things I was wondering was, even though the council didn't adopt the procedures of the changes that the council subcommittee suggested making, can we still refer to those changes if there's records of them available to sort of see basically things that were considered, so we don't need to go over everything again if they're like, okay, this standard and this standard and this standard might be useful, or is it just not available to us flat out?
That I would say that they would be available to us. And we could, depending on what the standard is that we're looking at could be used, but because they weren't adopted as part of that process. So Bob, Alex, is that
Yeah,
something
I
we
mean,
can
you
do?
can, the committee, can refer to any materials it wants and, coming up with those. So if you think those are valuable, you could look at, those drafts that went to the city council. They're certainly not binding, they weren't adopted, so not binding, but you could refer to them just like you could refer to anything you thought might be informative or helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as a reference material sort of thing. So yeah, that's good to know. And then let's see, were there other questions? So I think part of the reason to partially address Commissioner Bender's earlier question about why it's 2 or more people is that, a lot of standards talk about multifamily housing, and usually single unit house isn't defined as multifamily housing, but if you've got 2 or more houses, then it's multifamily. So I assume it's just for generality. The other thing that I'm a little bit confused about is that it seems as though a lot of the time the objective standards are required for basically the ministerial review side of things. But I'm wondering to what extent subjective standards will still be permitted in discretionary review projects. So, because I know that a lot of the bills basically adjust certain things to be more ministerial review, particularly SB 35 and other bills that expand or adjust that one particular. But I know that there's some standards that do call for qualitative judgment and review and might be challenging or impossible to translate into an objective standard. So what sort of space is there going to be for subjective standards once the objective ones are written? Is there going to be any at all, or are there only going to be objective standards?
I'm going to correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I'll let you jump in after, but I'll take a swipe at this. Well, like, for example, let's say, and I'm going to use color, for example. If like in one area, we call out that a building may be red, green, or blue, we offer them a slate of colors instead of just whatever they want, that there's kind of discretion in that regard, but there's still a standard that it's either got to be red, blue, or yellow.
So
If I'm
the city can't adopt any new subjective standards. They, the subjective standards we have can be maintained, and depending on what approval is sought, there may still be discretion. So if someone is applying for SB 35 approval, that's a ministerial process. There's no discretion the city can execute. If someone is applying for some other type of approval, just like, none of the housing projects we saw last year were seeking ministerial approval. But the city's review of all of those projects was governed by the Housing Accountability Act that says the city can't deny the project if it meets all of the city's objective standards. So the point of adopting these objective standards is to have in place really clear rules so that you guarantee that the projects you get are not are projects that the city wants. Because otherwise, if let's say you had, no objective standards, let's say you had density was the only objective standard and nothing else was objective, you'd have to approve any project, no matter what it looked like, as long as it met that density standard. If there's someone is seeking that discretionary approval, you still have some wiggle room to use your discretion on elements of the project. So if they're seeking a ministerial, let's say the color example, and we don't have a color established. If they're seeking ministerial approval, we have to approve it. However, it's applied. If they're seeking a discretionary approval and we don't have that standard, we couldn't deny the project. But we might be able to, approve it and condition it that the project is blue or something like that. Now, at a certain point, your condition amounts to, being so onerous or so significant that it's, really a denial of the project. So for example, we wouldn't condition something on them completely changing the layout of their site plan, but we might condition them on saying, we don't want white trim on the white building. You have to, pick a contrasting color, and that's probably justified. So that was a long, sort of winded answer, but hopefully that got at.
Yeah, that clarifies it. So basically the importance of having objective standards to be able to deny things within those categories.
Correct.
And we can still use subjective standard for things that are coming up before us for discretionary review to modify things, but not to deny them. And we can't create new subjective standards. Got it. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. I just have some simple questions that are related to page 4, table 3, and that's the Pinole Municipal Code. So as we've seen over the last couple of years, a number of the projects that have come before us, we do see an increase in density. And I just wonder if we're going through trying to put objective standards in our processes, if there's an ability to add some type of verbiage in here that allows the flexibility to increase the bonus density on these different mixed, like the residential mixed area, the rural. Currently, we've got some specific guidelines, but we're finding more and more that these projects are becoming larger, right? Do we have the ability to put some language in there that will give us as commissioners the ability to approve and accept some of these projects that may require this?
So are you asking to allow density over and above what the density bonus would require the state to accept?
Right. So that's where the question comes in, Alex, is we have guidelines, right? But when the new Senate bills came out and required that we bump that up, it completely changed that, but we didn't update our language.
Right.
So if we're updating the language now, is there an ability to add additional language that says specific to the new Senate bills, the bonus density, we will allow flexibility in these environments.
Yeah,
Something along those.
yeah,
lines.
and just for the newer commissioners, because this came up a lot when we were dealing with those housing projects. There's something known as the state density bonus law that basically allows projects to do a couple of things. One is get a density bonus. If they provide a certain amount of affordable housing, they can get a density bonus, which allows them to go over and above the city's density cap. So if our density, just to do really simple numbers, if our density is 100 units per acre and they get a 10% bonus, they could do 110 units per acre. And the amount of the bonus depends on what percentage the unit is affordable and how affordable, is it low income or very low income. And then they also get something called concessions and waivers, which basically allow them to not comply with, to a certain extent, they have a limited number in some cases, not comply with standards that the city has adopted. So if we have a setback requirement, they might be able to not comply with our setback requirement. And I think what the commissioner is referring to is right now our findings sort of will say things like complies with all of our standards might be a finding. And state law says, well, if you comply with them with the use of if you're using a density bonus provision to get around complying, you're deemed to be in compliance. But our standards don't really acknowledge that. So we sort of are making these findings because state law makes us, but without. And so that was some long background, but we could add that language, and we probably will add that language into the findings to say, complies with Pinole standards, or complies with the standards with the use of a density bonus or something like that.
Excellent. Thank you. That was the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Julia Lam. Julie.
I just had, if I can get clarification on the Old Town Design Guide on page 7. How is the city going to determine the qualified cultural resource consultants? What is the vetting process for that? And just what are the standards right now? Just plain language of just what is classified as the historical character of Pinole. It seems really vague.
It is really vague. And so what we're saying is as part of that standard, that we could be saying as part of that standard, that we would need to bring in a qualified cultural resources expert to, yes, this is a historic building. It has such and such design features. It was established in in 1947, or just get out there, and we're using the state interior. You need to use the state interior or Department of Interior standards in the way to fix build. So that's usually you need a qualified cultural resource person to be able to do that.
And then just to follow up, let's say if it was not a large developer that is wanting to take over a space, and it was a smaller mom and pop shop that's been there for a bit, and then we have these new guidelines. Would the city be able to assist the smaller mom and pop shops to be able to get up to reach those guidelines, so then they're not having to be a small business and then having to pay such and such to keep the character?
So the city council could certainly choose to assist, but just to note, these design guidelines only apply prospectively to new projects. So something that's in place that doesn't meet these guidelines, could continue in place. If that, small business owner decided, I want to tear down this building and build something new, that's when they'd have to comply with the standards.
Okay, thank you. I'm complete.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sandoval.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a couple of questions, regarding the housing density bonus. Would that be included in the objective design review as part of the new standards that we would ultimately decide to adopt?
So the city has a density bonus ordinance, it's in state law, and state law requires that the city have an ordinance. And we have one. I believe a program in the housing element was to adopt it because it hasn't been to update it because the state density bonus law, every year the legislature changes it a little, and I don't think the city has updated it in a while. We've based off of what state law tells us we have to do, but sort of haven't addressed that ordinance just because there've been other priorities. So that will be getting updated. That's a program in the housing element, so that will be getting updated on a separate track from this.
Thank you. And I guess my second question was a little bit more directed towards staff. In reference to the subjective design reviews, was the goal more to reduce the amount of subjective things that the planning commission can see to essentially kind of streamline housing projects?
That's the goal usually, based on state law. However, I think that, like Alex was saying, on new projects, but if there are existing projects that also require to come back to you, meaning that same building, they're not really changing the building, but they're changing something in the conditional use permit that comes back to you, then you could still use those same standards. But yeah, anything new, then yeah, we'd have to go by the new standards.
And it just makes it easier for the city then, like an objective standard, putting aside the density bonus for saying something that the city can enforce. If it's not an objective standard, it just becomes a little bit of a gray area of, well, how far is too far for us to impose this? And, there have been things in past approvals that the commission has requested, and normally you get developers willing to sort of try to work with the commission, especially when the commission's requests aren't that big. But let's say a developer wasn't willing to do that, you want to be able to enforce it, and that's where the making objective.
Thank you. That would be all for me.
Great, thank you. Just a quick couple comments on the timeline. It looks like the meeting minutes or the staff report says approximately 6 meetings, but I think there's about 5 identified in the timeline. Is the 6 just kind of a floater in case?
Yeah, I mean, it needs there might be one needed between planning commission and city council. If it goes, depending if city council, or planning commission makes a lot of changes, and we can take it back to the ad hoc committee and then bring them back to the planning commission for review. So yeah, there's a floater meeting in there for the most part. But yeah, will be meeting those. We'll probably need all six meetings.
Okay. And then in looking at the last page of the attachment 1, looks like each ad hoc meeting is intended to address either specific plan items, zoning code items, or Old Town guidelines. Are they kind of all equally, not weighted, but is there equivalent amounts of alls? Or is one meeting for each kind of section going to be?
Well, we wanted to usually the specific plan is the one document that we use almost every day on every project within the corridors, and so that's the way we kind of ordered them in that regard. So the specific plan and the zoning code and the design guidelines. We wanted to keep. We didn't want to. Because we do have, our consultant that came through kind of went through all those documents and kind of made changes or recommended changes in that. And so we wanted to bring each document in by itself first to kind of go through all that particular document. And then at the end, then we'll bring them all together. And so because we keep bringing them all together, it can get kind of confusing. Well, we didn't change this, we didn't change that. Whereas if we change them, we do all the work on the zoning code, and we do all the work on the specific plan, and we do all the work on the design guideline, the downtown design guidelines. Then there will be another ad hoc meeting to say, okay, this is what we did this is what we did. And Justin and I will be the ones that kind of look at if there are inconsistencies, like let's say we made some inconsistencies between the design guidelines and the specific plan, and we'll bring those up. And that's kind of that last ad hoc meeting before we come to the planning commission to make sure that they're all online, and city attorneys will be reviewing them as well to make sure that they all meet the criteria for that as well. So that, but we wanted to start with the specific plan because they do have a lot of, like, in terms, they have 2 full chapters of public and private realm design guidelines that, and so, and most of our projects are really within those areas. So we wanted to make sure that those were justified.
And is there like a plan method to go through the list? Is there like just this is the staff report kind of lists just general categories of things, right? But there's like a list or some sort of.
We'll have the documents. I mean, we'll
Which
have
is the
the,
one
yeah,
by one.
we'll bring out, like, for example, we'll bring the specific plan out and we will show the changes that were, or the recommendations that were made, or what areas needed to be changed. And then we'll work through those areas, whether they're, I mean, the consultant kind of coded them to kind of some kind of like some low hanging fruit, what we could do pretty quickly. And then also outline some more difficult, which would probably require some major policy changes. And so we'll go through all that. I didn't go through that tonight because I wanted to make sure that was going to be the ad hoc committee that we would go through that in a thorough basis. Because we could be here for hours going over those, and you will go, planning commission will go over those. Believe me, we're going to have that meeting, maybe 2 meetings, but for tonight, we just wanted to make sure, we wanted to get the ad hoc committee started and get moving on that. So,
And I think I've heard a couple of people raise other items, density bonuses, that, are we limited to just what's on the list? Or is it kind of, as you go into this, you can also, hey, we found this is maybe a subjective thing we'd like to identify as more objective, or are we just limited to the list?
For right now, I mean, once we get into the document, if there are subjective standards that we think that need to be changed, we can always go through and change those. In terms of like the density bonus, I mean, there are other tracks where you're going to be more focused on more of the design standards, where density bonus, those are state standards, those are straight, and we'll identify those as well. But most of our stuff will be more towards, designs and heights and parking and those types of things. However, if there are things that are noted, the ad hoc committee wants to note, we can note those. And I can bring them up to Alex and say, look, this is something that they want to, is this something we want to do now? Or should we wait till we update that section of the code? Because those sections of the code will come to you as part of the zoning ordinance text amendment. They will come to you for a recommendation as well. So they might be on a different track, but they'll also be coming to you as well.
Okay. And I take it, and I think I've heard the answer of that Commissioner or Vice Chair Menace mentioned when we asked Attorney Mogg. For each of the items that are identified as subjective, we can either say, no, they stay as subjective, or they can become objective. We don't necessarily have to address every single subjective comment. We can elect to not do anything with and keep it as subjective or objective, or does each one subjective thing have to be?
Well, we would like at least to maybe suggest subjective language, and maybe if the commission as a whole feels that now we can leave that as it is.
Okay.
And we'll just make sure we make note of that as part of the ad hoc committee work that we do, that we make note that these are issues that the commission needs to see as a whole. And then we go through that way.
Okay. And so the last one I have is, so we're making, at the end of this process, we make a recommendation to city council to adopt recommendations. Is it worth, do we think we need to have another meeting if it gets kicked back to here? Do we have to go back and revise stuff? And then just to meet the June 24th.
Yeah, I mean,
timeline
these are all, the dates are kind of subjective in a sense. There is a little movement within the date. So if like in May, we get to May and the council says, you know what, you got to go back to the commission for some of this, then we'll go back to the commission. Or if they go back to ad hoc committee, they'll just add to the timeline.
Okay.
We kind of put the perfect scenario together.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It sounded like we were bound by a specific end time.
Well, the housing element allows us, the program of the housing element is like the first 2 years. It's in the first 2 years of the program. So if you look at program 13, so we have a little bit of time. And to be honest, with the housing element, even though as long as we're really done within the 8 years and we can go back and look and we say, yeah, we've completed these programs, because some might take longer than others. I mean, that's just the way it works. And depending on recommendations of what items we take first. I mean, we want to try to get as much done in the first two as are identified in the housing element in terms of plans and dates and, you know, years, but sometimes things come up and they last a little longer, but the goal is to do all of them within the 8 years. So, but I think that with this program and the way we set it up, I think we should be completed within the first 2 years of the housing.
That's all. And thank you again, you just staff and the consultants for putting together what is a truly exhaustive list of
Yeah.
items. Yeah, Vice Chair Matthew, more comments?
Yeah, I just have one question to follow up on some of the feedback that was given to Chair Benzuli. You said that the specific plan items were the highest priority for staff to have feedback on. But it seems like if I'm reading the timeline right and the associated charts, that everything's going to be adopted all at once at the end of the project. There's not multiple stages of adoption. It's just.
No, but we just felt that the specific plan was really the first one to attack, because that'll lead into the other documents. So we felt that because the majority of the projects were in the specific plan area, that we would address those first. And I mean, depending on what happens when projects, I mean, there's another kind of outline out there when projects are coming in, right? So, I mean, there could be, you know, we see have a project coming in and we might just have to move something a little forward, a little faster than, but we wanted to work on the specific plan first, because again, the majority of our projects are within that area. And so that gives us a very good foundation for the next two documents.
Sure. I mean, in terms of ordering, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, regardless of the revisions we make, none of them actually take effect and are usable by staff until the city council actually adopts it
Exactly. That is
in May, hopefully.
or sooner if we get the work done. I mean, if we can get it done and, you know, or, you know, if it takes a little longer, but, you know, yeah, we, you know, and hopefully I can get a meeting date tonight from you guys after the meeting, and we'll get started and get rolling.
Okay, yeah, that was my sort of follow-up question.
Okay. Is there any other feedback to staff on the report or any other further questions? Yeah, Commissioner Sandoval.
Thank you. One question that I was kind of thinking was that would the ad hoc commission just review all of this by themselves, or would it come back to would it come back to the whole commission for any feedback at any point?
Yeah, it'll come back to the commission when we've kind of completed most of the work, all the work, then it will come back to the commission for a full review of everything that they've done. And so because it's kind of the way we kind of put it together. So yeah, you will review it's we didn't include, like, after the planning commission, you know, after we did a specific plan, we're going to bring it to the planning commission and then do that, because then we'd have to take it all to the council. We wanted to take it all as one package, because you'd have different timelines of when things, for example, if we took the specific plan and we finished the work up in June or in September, and we brought that to the commission, the council, and that was approved. Now we've got the zoning code and the development code still to do, and haven't even started on that stuff yet. And so if there are issues in the zoning code or the guidelines that we have now we're in a pickle, because we've already adopted the design guidelines in the housing in the specific plan, but we haven't yet for the zoning code and that thing. And we all want to adopt them at the same time, but they have the same timeline. It's the same for implementation.
Thank you. That was helpful. That would be it for me.
Any other comments?
I just one question for staff. Is the intent of the document will include diagrams explaining if a requirement comes up, like you have to have a setback at a certain floor, certain distance, or something that projects out and how you space that and so forth and so on, just to make it more clear to the users of the document?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, once we settle on what those standards are, yeah, there'll be more. We'll probably have a consultant come online to help us put that whole package, what that whole package is together. Because I think we're working with two of them right now. They're waiting for us to do our work, and then they'll come back in, and then we can finish that. We can finish up that process. So, and if there are existing diagrams and that we have already in the documents, then we'll use those as well. So,
because from my readings, And as well as, being a past architect, it's the diagrams, make things very explicit as opposed to just simply endless paragraphs of text.
Right.
And I think that's probably also one of the goals of this whole effort is to make everything very explicit.
Any question on our feedback? Otherwise, I think the next step is actually it's not a subcommittee, right?
Yeah, just, we just need a motion and a second to direct the subcommittee to start the work, and then I'll work with the subcommittee to get a date, and time, and we'll go from there.
How many people are you looking for on that?
Well, the ad hoc committee that was approved at the last meeting as part of the reorganization, I think was John and Tim and Frankie, or no, Raphael. And
Okay.
So they're the ad hoc committee.
Okay, so it's not a separate ad hoc.
No,
Same ad
it's,
hoc.
it's our ad hoc.
Okay, okay. So what is actually the next step?
Just make a motion to direct the ad hoc committee to work on the objective
Okay.
development design standards and work with staff.
We can do that. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Before we make a motion, two things. First, my usual comment about export communications, sent out a message about this meeting occurring to my email list as normal. And secondly, we could ask for public comment at this point, right?
Yeah, we can't ask for, I was just going to mention that before we make motions, that we do need to take public comment.
Justin, is there any public comment? I don't see anyone online.
And there's nobody in my email, so.
Then would someone like to make a motion to assist the design review ad hoc committee to work with the staff to prepare the recommended guidelines?
Just a quick inquiry. The ad hoc committee would be able to decide the hours that it met on those days laid out in the timeline, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the week, that's usually the Monday. So I've included the whole week. Yeah, I've included the whole week. So if there are times that are better within those weeks, then that's kind of where it is.
So Dave, with your help, what I'd like to do is put forward the motion to approve the objective design and development standards. I guess the opening of this to be transferred over to the ad hoc planning commission to begin the work. Would that be a correct statement? As far as making the motion, would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Lamb Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandoval,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menes,
Yes.
Chair Benzuli.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Gonna read the actually, do I need to read out the appeal? Okay. I think closes that item. The next item is H City Planners Commission Report. Planning Manager Hannum.
I give the commission just a brief update on a couple of projects, just to let the commission know that we're getting ready to submit all of our funding reimbursements from our SB2 grant and our LEAP grant. And for the housing element. The housing element, also wanted to let you know that the housing element went back to the state, and we're hoping for a very quick review and approval and being in substantial conformance, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. So we were able to get that back into that state. We are working on we are still working with our existing projects. They're starting up the building permit process for a lot of these projects and getting their conditions of approval put in order. So we're still working with Pinole Vista and PCRE and Appian Village to get those permits going and doing that. So there's still a lot of work doing with that. We also are looking at putting a timeline together for parklets. So we'll be putting the timeline together to get those recommendations. And right now we're working on a couple of conditional use permit applications that will come before you here in the next probably few weeks. And that's all I have. So unless you have any questions on any
I
project.
think one thing I brought up last week was or last time was the Safeway, Terra Hills, whether that was a deed issue or something, or they backed out or something, that had moved forward again.
The entitlements for the Safeway project have expired as of June 20th, 2023. So any type of new work that needs to be done will be brand new, be resubmitted for staff and for the planning commission to review. So it expired June 20th to 2023. And so, yeah, so now there are no entitlements for that project.
Is the I think it's the Pinole is the old Kmart, is that part of the building permit? That's part of the one that is in the building permit process and the conditions of approval?
Yeah, they're doing a lot line adjustment. They're doing a ministerial lot line adjustment, and they're putting together they're trying to get their building plans to us probably late fall or late winter to get the building going. And they could be looking to do a demo permit here in the next probably 2 or 3 months. So they'll be working with the Public Works Department to take that building down. So we haven't gotten the application yet, but it's just what we've been keeping up with them on. So.
And then the lot across the street from the Pinole High School, any new interest in that?
There was an interest. I haven't been able to meet with the individual yet. And so I'm not quite sure where that's going to go. There has been some interest on that. I also wanted to tell the commission that regarding Pinole Shores 2 is I should have the renderings of what it would look like based on the trees and the viewpoints and all that too. So hopefully I'll have those this week. So that's something that also got reviewed to referred to the ad hoc committee. So on a different note, but hopefully we'll get those in this week and we could probably review those at the next ad hoc committee.
Great, thanks. Did anybody have other questions for staff? Great. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Sandoval.
Thank you. So I'm just looking for clarification that on the entitlements for the Safeway project. So that would mean that anything that they would want to do there would have to come back to the commission.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's no communications. Are there any communications?
I'm not sure whether this falls under communications or commissioner report, but at the car show, I had a chat with Matt, I think it was, didn't get his last name, from the county transportation department. And he expressed interest in looking at the sort of patches of sidewalk we've discussed at the commission before along San Pablo Avenue, sort of the falling down scree below the church and the whole patch
Yeah.
to the west of Appian and San Paulo, that intersection there where you've got basically no sidewalk at all. So they're aware of that now and they're going to have a look at it.
All right, great.
I should let people know that I discussed that.
Okay.
Any other communications? The next meeting, item J, will be the next regular planning commission meeting will be July 10th, 2023 at 7 p.m. And if there's anything else, I will adjourn the meeting.